Great, thank you. Greetings from Hong Kong, the world city of Asia. I'm not sure whether the audience here have a chance to visit this city. Right now it's about 32 degrees at 8 p.m. in the evening. I think it's as hot as many countries in the Middle East as well. So just want to send greetings to all of you. As introduced, my name is Andrew. I'm so delighted and honored to share the topic of Lead Like Water, which is based on my research and also my practice as a leadership consultant in Asia in the past 10 years. Just want to give you a brief outline of today. Basically, we are trying to look at 3 key topics. I'm sure we all agreed that we're living in a very globalized world, but the globalized, connected world also means very chaotic, very divided, and polarized. So it really calls for a different type of leadership to bring unity in such a diversified world. And as the topic suggests, I try to use the analogy of water. So if you happen to have a glass of water around with you, just make it handy. We will try to look at it and maybe trying to reflect upon how this water can give us insight into leadership. So just a little bit of introduction. I myself have a privilege to run different leadership coaching and training, primarily in this part of the world, in Asia. About 60% of my time, 60-70% of my time, training managers, mostly the age of Gen X, probably in the 30s, in the 40s of age. That is my 70% of my time, okay? I also like young people. So, and also that's also my research interest as well, understanding the millennial generation, how they differ from us, and what type of new leadership paradigm that we need to use in order to lead them better. That is my, my mission. So I also spend about 20 to 30 of my time, percent of my time, going to university, helping new graduates when they enter into the workforce, how they can be better prepared in the workforce. So we run programs like for thousands of students. Some pictures here. I think this picture is taken from one of the prestigious university in Hong Kong called Science and Technology of Hong Kong, which is kind of like the MIT in Asia. So we have been helping different universities in this part of the world to help the young people to get more ready into the workforce. Yeah, this picture I just actually got it from the Facebook. I think it's really relevant to this talk. So I kind of capture it and share it. So it says, we were all humans until race disconnected us, religion separated us, politics divided us, and wealth classified us. I think in the 2017, this is more true than ever. Looking at the news, looking at the world right now, I think although we are in a very connected world, we seem to be more divided. Just a little bit backtrack. Before I went into leadership consultant, I was working in the high-tech world, working in Silicon Valley company. So I was before trying to make internet as fast as possible, trying to make internet as connected as possible. I was naive about 15, 20 years ago. I thought, hey, when the world is more connected, people should be more, have better relationship, can communicate better with each other. But seems the opposite is true. Although we are all connected, but we are more polarized than before. So I changed my career about 10 years ago, trying to look at going to the other side, trying to help people on the soft skill leadership, trying to bring more unity in a team, in organization, and society. So when the world is more divided, we need leaders to bridge the divided world together. And we are we face a lot of gaps, chasm in the society. In a webinar like this, we only have about 40 minutes, so we cannot address all the gaps. Mainly when I work in different organizations as a consultant, as a trainer, as a coach, I find these two gaps become more prominent, become very divisive in the workforce today, at least in this part of the world, in Asia. I'm not sure whether that is true in the Middle East as well. But that two gaps, one is more the globalization. The team become more globalized. Team members can come from Pakistan, China, Japan. I was just consulting with a startup company. The CEO is from Pakistan, but his team is mainly made up of mainland Chinese and Hong Kong Chinese. So she faced tremendous pressure and tension in her team. The other dimension is the multi-generation domain, meaning that now the team has baby boomer, Gen X, millennial generation, sometimes we call it Gen Y. Also the Gen Z is coming on board very soon. Now the team make up of different age group, different generation, and different generation really bring different assumptions on the table for leaders to really trying to bring unity. I think these two gaps are key to many leaders right now. This is really the first time for me to engage with the Middle East participants like this opportunity. So I'm trying to look at some research on the web. How do you see the millennials, the young generation in Arab states? I kind of stumbled across Forbes magazine in the Middle East. They said there are 4 challenges, 4 struggles faced by the new generation in the Middle East. First of all, I said that majority of the millennials, the young generations, prefer more collaborative work culture rather than authoritative top-down type of leadership. I think that is true globally. I think that's definitely in China, in Hong Kong, in Asia. That's definitely a shift. So this article also said that similar thing is happening in the Middle East as well. And I kind of learned a new term. Is it wasta? I hope that I pronounced it correctly. I think that's very similar to the guanxi in the Chinese culture, meaning that it's all matter. It's more important about who you know rather than what you know. The relationship, if you know who is working in a certain company, that usually makes you easier to do business with and things like that. So I think that is very similar as well in Asia culture as well. But the new generation prefer more transparency, prefer different class of citizens. When they work hard, when they really have the talent, they want to move up to a certain class. But the wasta, really the waster, or like guanxi in China, sometimes prevent talented people to move up kind of upward mobility. So they see that as a struggle. Diversity, definitely gender diversity is a key issue in the Middle East. In China, in Asia, I think the gender equality is more normalized. I think we have, as you've seen, if you not pay attention to the news in this part of the world, Taiwan, Hong Kong now have female chief executive or president. Well, in Korea, we used to also have a female president, but she was just need to step down, but gender equality seems to be much more equalized in Asia, I think, compared to other parts of the world. But still, when you look at many of the research, still the pay scale and the glass ceiling still impose certain area to the female employee as well. I think the last part is also a global phenomenon, the effect of internet and social media, that also how to harness it, how to reach the young people, how to use that media effectively. That also is a big topic for leaders to the millennials as well. So I think many of these issues are global phenomenon, but also there are some certain states that Middle East may face a certain more challenging area as well. So when we look at this cultural and generation, just we need to understand that different country or different culture really define the generations differently. Although predominantly when we use the Western terminology, we will call it the baby boomer, Gen X, the Gen Y, or the millennial generation, but that is mainly used by the European and also American. In China, just for example, we use the term post-80 generation or post-90 generation. So basically, post-80 means that those who born after 1980s, and the post-90s is born after 1990s. So we kind of, in China, use that delineation or categories rather than the Gen X and Gen Y. In Japan, it's also interesting. They call the Gen X usually the pinball generation, because the Gen X usually, if you haven't have a chance to go to Japan, in the 1970s and 80s, the favorite pastime is go to the paintball machine. So that really captured the heart of the Gen X, so they kind of label it to the pinball generation. But the Gen Y, or the young generation in Japan, I heard one way of calling them is calling the One Piece, because One Piece is a very famous cartoon in the late 1980s, 90s. So for people who grew up with that One Piece cartoon, kind of like a private in the sea, so that can relate it to them as well. In Taiwan, sometimes we call it the strawberry generation, the young people, because they live in a very delicate and living in such a protected area. So we sometimes call the strawberry generation in Taiwan to portray the young generation. So this chart basically tells different country call it differently. I'm very interested maybe in the Q&A to learn how do the different Middle East states call the young generation. A certain label I'm interested to learn from you guys. But in this presentation, I'll pretty much stick with the Western categorization, mainly looking at Gen X, which are born primarily between 1965 to 1980s. The millennial generation, those were typically born after 1980 or 1985, depends on different people, but I generally use that. So roughly speaking, the millennial generations are the 20s and the early 30s in age. The Gen X are typically those are in the late 30s or in the 40s. So I myself is a typical Gen X. I'm not sure the distribution of the audience here, but I'm sure it would be probably a mix of Gen X and millennial generation. Maybe there's some baby boomer here, but here today I'm really looking at these two generations today. Okay. So let's now shift to the second topic. Okay, such diversity in the culture, such diversity in generation. What does it require for leaders to be more effective? Does it really need a different type of leadership? Okay. So first of all, I want to share one research from Harvard Business School. They did a very extensive research in the past few years, looking at employee satisfaction, engagement, and commitment. They look at many factors, and they see, okay, what does it really contribute to high employee satisfaction, high engagement, high commitment to the organization? And look at vacation, look at salary, look at all those factors. And they find out the key factor that are contributing to this three, basically that leads to high performance team, right? When you have a satisfied employee, when you are engaged and committed, you typically will have a high performance team. So what does it really mean? What does it really matters to all these three factors? And they find out that one key question stands out is the overall leadership effectiveness. Essentially, do the staff perceive their bosses are good, effective leaders? If they see they have good leaders, supervisor in the team, the employee satisfaction goes up, the commitments goes up, the engagement goes up, and vice versa. So out of many factors, leadership is the key factor, or the perceived leadership, okay? So the key issue then, the question is whether the millennial generations or different cultures see leadership differently, okay? So that is the key question. So when I did my PhD, I just basically finished my PhD a few years ago. My PhD research is looking at the Hong Kong market, the workforce, and looking at different generation in Hong Kong. And I asked one question: what is good leadership to you? And I asked the Gen X and the millennial generation. And I also asked if there is a gap of leadership. Basically, describe to me what is good leaders, and then describe to me right now your actual supervisor. Is there a gap? And I find out of my research, the bigger the gap is, basically comparing to the ideal leadership and the actual leadership they see, the bigger the gap, the lower the leader-follower relationship. Meaning that whether you have trust, whether you really can listen well with your leaders, you really think that your leaders are trustworthy, basically the relationship will be going down the bigger the gap is. So basically, you have one concept of good leader. If the actual leader is not as good, then the gap is bigger, then it leads to worse relationship. That kind of straightforward, makes sense, right? Then I look at how does that relationship, the leader-follower relationship, impact the commitment and impact the job satisfaction. And we find out that the worse the relationship between a leader and follower, the worse is the commitment. The better the leader-follower relationship, the better is the job satisfaction of the employee. So that seems to be quite straightforward. I think that just validates many research in the West, in different culture as well. So nothing new here. But then I try to look at whether the same similar relationship happens to the millennial generation and the Gen X. It's interesting that based on my research, it finds out that the sensitivity is different, meaning that the curve is still the same, meaning that leader-follower relationship, the better the commitment, the better the job satisfaction. However, the millennial generation, the blue curve here, is more steep, meaning that they are more sensitive to that, meaning that the younger generation, if they don't trust the leader, if the relationship falls apart, it really impacts the commitment to the organization. And it really impacts the job satisfaction. In Hong Kong, what many managers complain that the young people, the 20 years old, the millennial generation, do not stick with the same job. They change jobs frequently. I'm not sure whether that's true in the same part of the world in Middle East, but in Hong Kong, it complains a lot that they only work for 3 months and then they change job and things like that. So we usually, the Gen X manager, blame it to the young people. However, I usually, when they complain to me like that, as a consultant, I usually just turn it around. I'm kind of asked, perhaps, maybe perhaps, the leadership in your organization does just simply not matching the millennial generation's expectation. Then we have a dialogue to discuss what type of leadership, what type of culture your organization is it really fitting a young generation? So maybe it's not a fit, and the young generation is very sensitive to that gap. And once there's a gap, there will be leading to low commitment to the organization, then they leave. So that kind of explain why the young people seems to leave more frequently. Maybe it's not that bad. It's not they are just not good employee. Maybe it's just because the leadership style of the manager just don't exercise the right type of leadership. So when I dig deeper, at least in China, in Asia, we typically see leaders in the traditional sense. They are more top-down. They are more authoritative. They are quick in terms of making judgment. They are relatively higher in power distance. Supposedly, leaders need to know all the answer, and they win by experience. So that's typically the traditional leadership. However, when I interview the young people, they seem to want a different type of leadership. We just tentatively call it Leadership 2.0. It's really, rather than a top-down, very hierarchical organization, it's really a complex adaptive system. They really prefer leaders not to be authoritative, rather than they see more authentic leaders. Later on, we talk about what does authentic mean. Yes, they want kind leader, benevolent, but they want people that give always positive feedback, assertiveness. They want leaders to seek more understanding instead of judging them. They want to show compassion. The young people, the millennial generation, wants lower power distance, meaning that they can talk to the managers more frequently, sit down, have a coffee, rather than need to ask the secretary to book a meeting with them 2 weeks later. So they want more lower power distance. They also want leaders. They also know that leaders don't have all the answer because market change so quickly, but they really see that leaders need to ask the right questions and stimulate innovation. Okay. So when I look at this, hey, is this something new? Leadership 2.0, is this something new? Or what we can learn from really tradition, at least in the Chinese part of tradition. So when I look at the Chinese tradition, I'm not sure whether you heard about two very famous Chinese philosophers. One is called Sun Tzu. Okay, he's very famous, who wrote the book The Art of War. Okay, and also Lao Tzu. He was the Taoism, the founder of Taoism. And when I look at the writings, I find it, hey, wait a minute. Leadership 2.0, is it something new, or is it actually something that we can learn from the ancient wisdom? And both of them actually use water to describe good leaders. Lao Tzu in Taoism, one of the famous saying, good leaders are like water. Okay, he used that term, and he kind of saying nothing in the world is softer and more subtle than water. When confronting strength and hardness, nothing can overcome it. Okay, and in The Art of War, Sun Tzu also said that, hey, in the military, when you strategy is like water, it can adapt, it can also change course, it flows from up to down, and then it can actually find its way and then face the enemy. So when I look at it, I said, and we can really learn from this ancient wisdom, and they all point to water. So when I look at the Chinese way of describing leaders, we find that by looking at the water characteristics, we can learn a lot from as a leader. So this 5 points summarize the wateristic nature of leaders based on the Chinese ancient wisdom. And water is adaptive and flexible. I'm sure we all agree. If you have a glass of water, you can just look at it and you can just I'm just having a glass of water in front of me. When you move around the glass, you see that it's changing shape. It's adaptive. I happen to have 2 glasses. Now you can hear the sound. I'm pouring it into another glass. Hey, it can just change shape into fitting into another glass. So that really describes leaders need to be adaptive and be flexible. Second, water needs to be altruistic to others, meaning they add value, they help other people. I'm sure when you have a glass of water, let me just have a sip. I find it refreshing. It quenches my thirst. So water is altruistic and help people. Okay, and you also want to look at water. Water is modest and humble. You can find water everywhere. It's not glamorous. It's not like wine, but water is always there. It's humble and modest, just like good leaders. Water, when you look at the color, is transparent and clear. So it represents leaders need to demonstrate transparency, openness to other people. Also, when you look at water, water is gentle. Water seems to be salt, but when you look at the river, it can change the shape of very hard rocks. When you look at waves in the sea, it can actually change the sea course, the coastal line. So it's gentle but persistent but strong. So all this, when I kind of doing the reflection and find out, hey, good leaders can really learn from the wateristic characteristics. So in the next section, probably we don't have time to go through all 5 of them, okay? All 5 characteristics. I'll probably go through the first 3, and then we can open up the questions. And by looking at that, you will really see, hey, this type of leadership is really can bring more unity in such a diversified world. Okay, let's look at the first one. Lead like water, characteristics 1. We see that we can all try to become more adaptive leaders. Lao Tzu, the Taoism founder, once said, if you realize that all things change, there's nothing you will try to hold on to. So I think one of the key problem of leaders is we have lots of experience, typically the Gen X or the baby boomer leaders. We have 10, 20 years of experience. Sometimes experience is tremendously treasure, but sometimes experience can make us less adaptive, make us less risk-taking and innovative. So this we really need to can learn from water. And many leadership models find out that one size does not fit all. Okay, I'm sure you heard about leadership theory like situational leadership, adaptive leadership. It all kind of changed that one size does not fit all. Male, female, American, different culture, different generation. We really need to look at the shape, and like water pouring into different vessels, and sometimes we need to change shape. We still are water. Water is still water, but we need to be adaptive to the external environment. There are many research looking at different cultural dimension And there are many good research. For example, the group research by Professor House. And also, I'm also happen to be a certified master trainer from a company called MRG, Management Research Group. They look at different country and they look at US as a basis, and they trying to look at how similar the leadership across different country. And I think this research was just done a few years ago. The bigger the smaller the distance, that means more similar. For example, when you look at the graph, the things in the bottom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they are all Caucasian, predominantly the race. So it's very similar. But Netherlands, Sweden, Germany, Denmark, countries at the top of this chart, it really find out the leadership differences. This effective leadership in different culture are very different than using US as a norm. In this research, unfortunately, it doesn't list out some of the Middle East country, but I'm sure the effective leadership in US, I'm sure very different than that in the Middle East. When I look at generation, at least in Hong Kong, using the sample size that I just did a few years ago, we find out that the leadership attributions quite different when I study the Gen X and the millennial expectation. So basically, I asked, what are good leaders? They all said that, yes, good leaders can maintain good relationship with the follower. Yes, that's all the same. Good leaders need to have good communication with the employee. That is true among the two generations. They show caring. They need to give feedback to develop. So superficially, that seems to be similar. But when I dig deeper, when I go into focus group, when I really ask, what does it really mean by good communication? What does it really mean by feedback? So I find that very interesting. The two generations, at least in Hong Kong, they expect a little bit different. For example, in Hong Kong, in communication, when I ask the question, what is good communication? What do you expect from a leader? They all said, they need to have clear communication to me as an employee. They need to clearly give direction as well. It's easy to understand, and they don't change from day one to day two. That's good communication. Okay, so Gen X typically agree that is good communication. However, when I ask the millennial generation, the young people, what does good communication from a leader means to you? That means usually mean, hey, I can have a conversation with the leader. They're not rushing to a meeting. They can listen. They sit down, and it's two-way. They are understanding not the task only, but they also understand my feeling, the challenges that I'm faced. So the millennial generation, when they talk about good communication, is more two-way, more feeling-centric. From a Gen X perspective, it is more clear one-way direction. Okay, in just one example, I probably don't have time to go through that in detail. But in terms of feedback, the Gen X was saying, okay, as long as you in a performance appraisal give me the right check mark, then I'm fine. Just once a year, formal, quickly get it done. Then yeah, that's good feedback. Okay, good formal is more formal. However, the millennial generation, when I ask what does good feedback mean, they really prefer more frequent, informal feedback rather than wait a year for performance appraisal, whether I'm doing a good job, whether I'm giving positive feedback immediately. When I'm doing a bad job, just tell me what I can improve. Probably they are more the Facebook generation. They need the continuous feedback, more frequent feedback. I think that kind of reflects that as well. Okay, so just essentially there are different expectations. across generation, across culture. So the good leaders need to be sensitive in those dimensions. So let me go into the second point. Bit like water is altruistic to others. Good quote from Lao Tzu is saying, becoming leaders that can develop others, treat those who are good with goodness, and also treat those who are not good with goodness. Thus, goodness is attained. So this is Lao Tzu, what leaders mean. So I think goodness, one of the expression of goodness is really demonstrate to be adding value, helping your team to grow. I think that depicts a contrast between a slave manager versus servant leaders. In fact, I'm not sure whether you heard about the concept of servant leaders. I think many managers, at least in Hong Kong, in China, in Asia, this part of the world, many of the managers are slave drivers. They want to get things done. They want to really, in Hong Kong, it's one of the hardest working city in the world. We are the longest working hours, 55 hours per week. So many people, many millennials seeing the managers as slave driving them. However, servant leaders is on the other way around. Two very key concepts is whether the servant leaders can become a coaching leader and as well as a mentoring leader. I think we don't have time to draw on it too much, but coaching leader really help the staff to gain skills on the how part of it. But mentoring leaders is more so helping them to address why, the purpose of life, the career direction. I'm lucky to, in my 20 years of my career, both experienced very good coaching leaders and mentoring leaders. So it's part of my job right now to train leaders in this part of the world to become more servant leaders. Essentially, coaching leaders versus task manager, more people focused as a coaching leader, providing care, having a dialogue, it's relationship focused. I think you all get it. I think the young generation really prefer more so the coaching leaders. Characteristics 3 of lead like water. Water is modest and humble. One of the key things is measured by the power distance. Okay, what Lao Tzu was saying that in the highest antiquity, people did not know that they were there as a leader. The next stage is they love them and praise them, and the next they fear them, and the next they despise them. So it really tells you different distance from a leaders and employee. When you have fear base, that's usually the power distance is high. Okay, so the power distance is extent in which less powerful members of organization expect and accept the power is distributed unequally. So, and there are research showing that the millennial generations really prefer a lower power distance than the previous generation. So meaning that it's more easy, it's more approachable, having an open door policy, having a more frequent coffee chat with the younger staff, that's demonstrating a lower distance, power distance as preferred by the millennial generation. So what are some tips that can lower the power distance? Leaders need to involve more staff in decision making, can practice more active listening to the staff suggestion, holding more informal coffee dialogue or tea dialogue in the pantry, having an open door policy. And when you learn really delegation is not just giving command and direction. It's truly when you delegate the staff, you spend time, brief the staff, really develop them, teach them, mentoring them, and then let them to to delegate the stuff to them. So the delegation, the true form of delegation, really needs a shorter power distance. Delegation is not just top down. You just follow my order. You do what I told. It's really spending time, having a discussion, understanding the situation, and help them to overcome challenges. Okay. I probably don't have time to look at characteristics 4 and 5. Just want to quickly go through it. Transparency and clear, that really call for authentic leaders. And authentic leaders spend more time sharing with the staff with storytelling. So storytelling is a very important skill as authentic leaders. The more you can share your experience in story, the more you can reflect and have crystallize your experience into knowledge and wisdom, and then you can actually help the other team members to inspire them. And also, authentic leaders is more transparent, more open, share more information to them, and just don't hide more information from them. And when leaders make mistake, in China, it's very difficult. We don't have a culture to say sorry as a leader to the young people. But really, the young people, their IQ is very high. They have very sharp eyes. So my encouragement is to be more courageously vulnerable. If there's mistake made by leaders, it's much preferred to upfront say sorry to them, apologize, and move on. And that's much more preferred by the new generation. And the Gen X is really not used to that, at least in this part of the world. And we really need to learn to be more courageously vulnerable. Okay. I probably don't have time to go through the 5th characteristics, but it's talking about to be gentle yet persistent, give feedback to the staff, both positive feedback and negative feedback in a persistent way, like water hitting the stone, hitting a rock. You may not see result immediately, but through time, it will actually change the rock, transform people in a team. Okay. So if I just want to summarize, I'm running out of time. I went through this 5 characteristics very quickly. Just this short webinar, I hope that it can inspire you. Next time when you have a sip of water, like what I just did, think about how does water give you inspiration to be a better leader today? How can that sip of water make you more adaptive, make you more modest, make you more willing to add value to people, more transparent, more gentle and persistent? And all this, if we can do that, we can just like water a little bit more, I'm sure we can drive unity in diversity. In such a divided, polarized world, water is a universal solvent. It can dissolve a lot of conflict. And the more we can tap into this ancient wisdom, especially facing a young generation, facing different culture, we look at water and give us inspiration. And I'm sure that you will become a better leader by driving unity in diversity. In the last one, I want to share this little short video to you. Since I'm from Hong Kong, this is a Bruce Lee. I probably have a little bit of difficulties running the YouTube video. Let me see if I can play it, okay? Hmm. Okay, not sure whether you have watched any kung fu movie from Hong Kong. What you just heard is from was from Bruce Lee, the kung fu master, when he was doing an interview by by a TV, and the person asked, "What is your kung fu philosophy?" He was just describing his kung fu philosophy is it's like water. Um, if you like to watch that, that's the YouTube link, or you can just type Bruce Lee water, and you can get inspiration from the Make in Hong Kong Kung Fu Master. And if his Kung Fu philosophy is coming from water, hope that your leadership can also be inspired by the analogy of water. That concludes my presentation. I hand it back the time to the moderator.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Andrew. Folks, we're now open for question and answers. So if you have any questions, you could either put it in the question box or you could raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the webinar console. So if you click on it, I will unmute your microphone so you can have an audio check with the professor. Let me see if there was a caller who raised a hand. But okay, let me go to let me go straight to the question box. There are a couple of questions. Dr. Andrew, do you think the cultural differences or generation differences impact more to effective leadership styles?
I see both can impact the leadership style and towards and effective leaders need to really look at both. However, usually the cultural difference is more visible because when you look at a Chinese versus African versus Caucasian in US, it's very visible that there's a difference. The language is different and things like that. So it's easier to remind you that they are different and easier for you to use different leadership style. However, the generational difference is typically more subtle because usually it's in the same race. It's just the age difference. And when we look at the age difference, we usually can be more biased because we are looking at younger generation. The Gen X manager usually have years of experience versus just a few years of experience. So we sometimes may get more emotional to the young people when they don't live up to expectation. So I see, so the answer is both may impact leadership effectiveness, but one is more visible, and leaders, the cultural one is usually easier to spot and then remind yourself to use another type of leadership style. But the age or the generation one, usually you need to remind yourself more in order to be aware to use a different type of leadership.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me go to another question. Do you think the ancient wisdom on leadership, like you shared from Lao Tzu and Sun Tzu, or modern research methods on leadership gives more insight to today's leadership?
Well, the more I look at the ancient wisdom, of course, there are good ancient wisdom, there are bad ancient wisdom. Some of the good ones, at least in China or even in some of it in other culture, some of the good ones, really the modern research really points and validate some of their years of experience. For example, the analogy that I shared, like water, the concept was developed by 2,000 years ago in Lao Tzu. But the more when we look at the latest research on leadership, for example, authentic leadership, or sometimes when we look at mindful leadership, some of the characteristics of authenticity really points to openness, clear, transparent relationship. The modern research actually validates some of the ancient wisdom. So I find the two are really good researchers need to look at both the ancient wisdom and the modern science and how they can actually reinforce each other. So I don't see one is better than the others. I see both if you study in depth, both can give you lots of insight in leadership.
Thank you very much. And we have one last question. If there are so many variables, culture, generation, personality, for leaders to consider in order to adjust their leadership style, will it be too difficult practically, especially if some leaders have a large global team to manage?
Yeah, I guess the key thing is not to be overwhelmed by the differences. Yes, when I use the analogy of water, there are many different glasses, the cups, container, and we say, oh, there's so many variables. When I look at the culture, look at the age, I need to adjust so much. So sometimes I'm overwhelmed by so many variables. I think the key is you need to first understand yourself first. What is your own cultural background? What is your own age? What is your own personality? So this is understanding yourself, building a strong self-awareness. And you know what you're good at. You know sometimes you're not good at some type of people. Then when you need to work with certain type of people that is very different than you, the age is very different than you, when the culture is very different than you, then you ask yourself, okay, how do my own style need to adjust? I'm not saying that you need to completely change. I'm suggesting that you know your own limitation, you know your own preferences. Then when you are in a very different environment, when you are working with a different age group, you just need to observe, fine-tune, and also you'll be surprised. Even when you look at the worst enemy is stereotyping, meaning that, oh, Chinese, when I look at Chinese, then every Chinese is the same. When I look at Japanese, every Japanese is the same. That's what the research is saying, that they need face giving, they need guanxi, then everybody is the same. I think the key thing is you treat people uniquely, differently. Each person has his own culture fingerprint, has his own generation fingerprint. They are all unique. Know them, talk to them, understand them. And if that validates some of the assumption of a certain cultural type, of a certain age type, then that gives you some indication that you need to adjust accordingly. But sometimes it may not be so. You just need to try and error. Just whenever you just constantly look at it, whether I'm having the click, whether I'm having the connection, whether I'm building the trust with that person. If it's building up, that means I'm having the right leadership style. If I'm not, then I'm kind of change it, trying to adjust it. Then that's the way of modern leaders need to do. Observe, adjust, and validate. So that's the key to be effective leaders today.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Andrew. That really brings us towards the end of the webinar. And I really want to thank you on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship for your time to deliver this webinar. So thank you very much. And
thank you. It's my honor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you all of those who participated in this webinar. And please be informed that we are recording this webinar, so please stay tuned to webinar.mile.org to learn about our upcoming programs, webinars, and to equally access the recorded version. With that note, we'd like to end and conclude. So you all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling from. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.